Hello, how are you all? I hope you all had a wonderful week. Tonight, I pray that the Lord will continue to bless us with His presence so that we'll be able to sing the song of Moses, praising Him for strength and salvation. May He provide us, as He did with the Israelites, our daily needs and protection. We've been studying the book of Exodus with the story of a chosen people who were enslaved in Egypt, a heathen country. And after 400 plus years, the people, the descendants of Abraham, were brought out of the country. During the many years in Egypt, they had lost much of their identity and faith. The survival of this people depended on their transformation from the heathen culture that they were accustomed to, turning to the faith of their forefather. In a sense, it is speaking to us too. We need learning lessons from our Lord because we have lost our identity due to years of living in a materialistic world that doesn't know God. We will notice in these chapters, there's a repeated cycle of complaint, and then instruction from the Lord, and then God's provision. God is patient. He has been taking time to teach His people. Last chapter also taught us that the seventh-day Sabbath is a gift from God. Resting on this day demonstrates our acceptance of His gift, and that we trust Him for our daily needs. Also, in keeping the seventh-day Sabbath reminds us that holiness is not earned or inherent, but it is also a gift from the Lord. The people receive the Lord's holiness by doing nothing. And later on in chapter 31, verse 13, God told the Israelites, "You must observe my Sabbaths. This will be a sign between me and you for the generations to come, so you may know that I am the Lord who makes you holy." Sabbath, so, is also a sign that there is a saving relationship between God and us. Now let's move on to chapter 17 of Exodus, beginning with verse 1. Then all the congregation of the children of Israel set out on the journey from the wilderness of Sin, according to the commandment of the Lord, and camped in Rephidim. But there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people contended with Moses and said, "Give us water, that we may drink." So Moses said to them, "Why do you contend with me? Why do you tempt the Lord?" And the people thirsted there for water. And the people complained against Moses and said, "Why is it you have brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, "What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me." And the Lord said to Moses, "Go on therefore the people, and take with you some of the elders of Israel. Also take in your hand your rod with which you struck the river, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock in Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, that the people may drink." And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. So he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, because of the contention of the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Following God's instruction, the people left the wilderness of Sin. Actually, Sin is short for Sinai. They advanced forward and camped at Rephidim. Again, there was no water. And the people, the passage says, contend with Moses, meaning they quarreled with Moses. Remember last chapter we said Moses had reminded them that God was their leader in the Exodus and not him. In quarreling with Moses and complaining, they tested the Lord. They wanted a proof whether God was present with them, even though they had the pillar of cloud and fire leading them, and a bunch of other miraculous signs and wonders to prove that God was there. You know, in the Hebrew text, it described how the people complained. They asked, "Is the Lord there? Perhaps the Lord is not there." So, when problems or difficulty occur and we have no solution, is it okay to complain and doubt God? It is a tough question to answer because we all do that sometimes. I realized the Israelite was not merely having a problem with complaining, but the complaining revealed that they had a problem with their relationship with God. They don't trust him, and they don't trust Moses. The passage reveals that they did not wait on the Lord, and they were quarreling with Moses. In fact, they were about to stone Moses. This is what they said to Moses. They accused him. "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" They were implying that Moses, actually God, has been intending to kill them from the beginning. The lacking of water wasn't Moses' fault, right? And so Moses cried out to God. A scholar commented that Moses' strength is he always brings his difficulty to the Lord. He trusts the Lord. And so God told Moses to take a few of the elders with him and make sure that he brings the rod with him. In another version of Bible, they said the staff, right? We know what it is. So God told Moses to bring a few of the elders with him and also make sure that he brings the rod with him. The specific rod that turned the Nile River into blood, right? And why God told Moses to bring the rod? I believe the rod will remind Moses and the people God's miraculous signs and wonders in Egypt and at the Red Sea crossing. Their confidence in God was weak and needed to be strengthened. And God said he would stand before Moses on the rock at Horeb. What a comforting reassurance from God that Moses will not be alone. God will be with him. And so God instructed Moses to strike this rock in Horeb, and water will come out of it. This was a fantastic miracle because water doesn't usually come out from a rock in this way, right? And so the miracle was performed in front of the elders and the people as God had commanded. Afterward, Moses renamed that place Massah and Meribah. Massah means temptation. The people tested God. Meribah means strife or contention. The people fought with Moses, even wanted to kill him. So the place Rephidim now is called Massah or Meribah. In this passage, we continue to witness the patience of God. He did not scold or punish the people. God knew they still needed more lessons to learn to trust him. God immediately solved the problem of thirst and resolved the anger problem with Moses. He was helping them to rebuild their trust in the leader he had chosen for them, Moses, and also he was helping them to build their trust in him. We also observe the passage mentioned about the elders. They haven't been mentioned since the beginning of the Exodus, specifically during the time of Passover. and they will begin to play an increasing role to support Moses. Now let's read on. Now Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim, or just now we say that the place was renamed Massa or Meribah. And Moses said to Joshua, choose us some men and go out fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses said to him, and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And so it was, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands became heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, write this for a memorial in the book and recount it in the hearing of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called its name, The Lord is my banner. For he said, because the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Another challenge came. Seems like problems are coming one after another. Verse 8 said Amalek came to fight with them unexpectedly at Rephidim. Rephidim is the same location. They hadn't moved out yet. So who are these Amalek people, or we call them Amalekites? According to Genesis 36:6, they were the descendants of Esau. They were nomadic. Seems like the descendants of Jacob and Esau were incapable to reconcile, right? We know that they are still fighting today. And there was no mention of Israelite complaining this time. That's good. Perhaps it is because they had just witnessed God's presence in bringing water out of the rock, and the faith was still strong. We also observe for the first time in Exodus, Joshua and Hur's name were mentioned, and they were called to action. Joshua's name was very appropriate for the occasion. It means Yahweh saves. And Hur was Caleb's son. Caleb was one of the leaders of the tribes. And Hur was the leader of the tribe of Judah, and later on share administrative leadership with Aaron. We could read that in Exodus chapter 24:14. And the Amalekites were mentioned quite a few times in the Old Testament. In Numbers 14:25, Judges 3:13, Judges 6:3, Judges 10:12, and Psalms 83:7. This time, we observe God did not give any direct instruction until after the battle. And also in this passage, it did not say anything about God's presence or his glory. But I'm sure he was there. We read that Moses instructed Joshua to choose some men to go out and fight with the Amalek. And he further revealed to Joshua that tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hands. Probably he wanted Joshua to be encouraged. When he lifted up the rod, it shows that what? God was there. Scholars said perhaps God was setting a new paradigm here in this incident. He was fighting behind the scene. He did not show a cloud or his glory. He fought behind his chosen people. Although we mentioned that God was not visible in this incident, but his intervention is clear, right? Moses said, I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. And then what happened? The passage said, as long as Moses held up his hands with the rod, the Israelites were winning or became stronger. And when Moses became tired and rested or lowering his hands, the men of Amalekite were winning. And so when Moses was tired, they gave Moses a stone to sit on. And Aaron and Hur would use their hands to hold up Moses' hands with the rod. At the end, Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword, the passage said. He totally defeated the enemy. He was not working alone. We know that, right? Because the passage said that Amalekite, although the passage said the Amalekites were defeated by Joshua, but Joshua was strengthened by the Lord through Moses' hands with the rod, and Moses' hands were strengthened by Aaron and Hur. It was teamwork. Afterward, the Lord told Moses for the first time to write this on a scroll. So they, the people, would have a record of this great event of teamwork. And this great event was God's redeemed people being attacked in their infancy and was saved by a difficult and faithful action of Moses, Aaron, Joshua, and Hur. God wanted the future generations to remember the Amalekite attack and the promise that God will blot out the name of Amalek from under heaven. God said, make sure that Joshua hears it. Joshua was the heir to Moses' leadership. Remember when Moses died, Joshua became the leader of the Israelites. And God wanted to make sure that Joshua hears this so that he would remember God's protection and how God had worked through himself and Moses during this occasion. If we read the book of First Chronicle, we know that the tribe of Simeon had wiped out the Amalekites in the day of King Hezekiah, which was more than 500 years later. And this is recorded in First Chronicle 4:43. And so we know that God had blotted out the Amalekites as he promised in this passage. And you know, no one would have remembered the Amalekites if this text was not preserved. God knew what he was doing when he told Moses to write this down. And then Moses built an altar and called it, "The Lord is my banner." This was the first altar Moses built for the sake of a thanksgiving offering. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob also built such altars to share a meal with God, right? Remember we read that in Genesis chapter 12, chapter 13, chapter 26, chapter 35, and chapter 17. To give thanks for their safety and deliverance. The blood and fat of the flock animal were given to the Lord, poured out and burned. And this meat was shared among the people. So, this instruction was recorded in Leviticus chapter 7, verse 15. After crossing the sea, the people sang, right? "The Lord has become my salvation." And now they offered thanks at an altar and gave God the title, "The Lord is my banner." The visual image of 6 hands holding Moses' staff or rod probably looked like a banner or battle standard and served as a rallying symbol for fighting men. Moses, however, gave the credit to the Lord. "The Lord is my banner." In summary, what have we learned? I have 3 observations. Number 1, there's a deep meaning when Moses struck the rock at Horeb and the water gushing out to satisfy the people's thirst. So what is the deeper meaning? The rock actually represents Christ. Let's read 1 Corinthians 10:14. Paul wrote of Israel in the Exodus. He said, they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. Jesus was struck, and living water flowed out for all who receive. It gives life by quenching our spiritual longing. Second observation. At Rephidim, the people encounter problem and they complain. Is the Lord there? Perhaps he is not. Besides, at the rock, they also later at Mount Sinai, at the Lord's presence, they also complain. The passage said his presence was for all to see. Their doubting escalated at Mount Sinai. So now their slogan is not, is the Lord there or not? The slogan has changed to, do we want the Lord there? At the bottom of Mount Sinai, they made another god, the golden calf, right? So this is a sober reminder for us all that denying God's presence can bring us to a slippery slope of actually refusing his presence. Third observation. In this narrative, we observe importance of teamwork and persistence in prayer. Moses' leadership was supported by Joshua, Aaron, and Hur. And Joshua persevered in battling the Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur prayed on the hill.